Good evening, YouTube world. It's Gordon Causey. And if you are brand new to my channel, if you've never tuned into one of my YouTube lives before, Candy the Wonder Pup, who we should have named COVID or Corona because we got her on March 18th of 2020 after having picked her out from a breeder back in February of that year. She shows up at the start of every video because, as I always say, she has conditioned me. I am well trained. I have to give her a treat at the start of a video, and as soon as I say hello or I'm live or whatever I say at the beginning, she jumps up on me and it's like, give me my treat. But I make her jump through a few hoops, just a few. Sit, shake a paw, lay down, speak. Oh, she's in good voice tonight. Show off your pretty face. There you go. She's a border collie Aussie Shepherd cross, and thank goodness we got her. And when we did get her, we picked her out and paid for her in February of 2020 before the insanity. And then she would have cost it would have cost us probably double or triple the amount that we paid for her if we'd wanted to get her in the summer. But anyway, thank you for tuning into my channel. I'm going to be talking about masking tonight. If you like my content, I would ask you to please hit the like button. It helps. I think it helps. I think it helps increase my exposure. I don't know. I don't understand the algorithms. This is miserable, pathetic, no production value YouTube channel, just a 58-year-old guy, the living embodiment of cancel culture. I'm old, I'm white, I'm straight, I'm Christian. I click all the boxes to be labeled part of the fringe minority, and guys like Justin Trudeau say that my views are unacceptable. And so does YouTube and Google at times. I have been stepped on. I've had videos canceled. I only got back online last Wednesday night after having a week-long suspension for saying the wrong thing about my opinion of the vaccines, even disclaiming that non-expert. And I'll say that same thing again now. I am not an expert. I have no degrees in no science degrees, no medical degrees. Anna Monarchy is here. Good evening. The live chat is on. If you're new, I always have, almost all my videos have live chat. And I genuinely enjoy the engagement. I like reading the comments, responding to them. Anna Monarchy is wishing me a good evening, and likewise to Anna Monarchy. And that you meet all the criteria to qualify as the most demonized demographic. Oh yeah. Old, Christian, white, male, Christian, and pretty much all my videos these days, of late, have been faith-based, and this one's not going to be. But I do not shy away from professing my Christian faith. But I'm not. This message tonight, what I'm going to be talking about is masking. I would ask you to judge the content, not the messenger. Look at the message. And I'm going to be taking you through what I'm going to call my masking odyssey, taking us all the way back to 2020 when COVID was first declared a thing. First, it was a public health emergency of international concern, the same designation that monkeypox has just been given, or mpox, I guess is the more politically correct term. Apparently, for some reason, monkeypox is racist. I don't understand that, but whatever. I mean, is swine flu, we still call it swine flu. Is that racist? Whatever. Daniel Copeman is mon ami de la ville de Montréal. He's from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Bilingual, as am I, plus ou moins, more or less. I'm an Anglophone. But I spent 2011 to 2015 in Quebec City. I was in the military back then, and I was posted to Valcartier. I'm actually wearing, and I can't do the right left. I'm wearing my regimental T-shirt. I was with the 5e Brigade Mécanisée, the 5th Mechanized Brigade Group, and the what I'm wearing right now, it has a red cross. I can't get my finger to go where I want it to. I got to look down. I can't do it on the screen because everything goes backwards. But there's a red cross in the maple leaf there. That's because I was posted to a medical unit. 5e Ambulance de la Campagne, 5th Field Ambulance. I no medical background. I was in the communications branch. So I was, when we were doing exercises centered around the medics going out and doing mass casualty events and things of that nature, I was in the command post, le poste de commandement, talking on the radio. But I moved to Brighton, Ontario, small town here, when I got posted into 8 Wing Trenton. And anyway, so 2015 till present, I've been living southeastern Ontario, small little rural area, and I love it. And Monarchy writes, China flu is racist, but Spanish flu is not. I know. It is absolutely insane. And Daniel Coleman has watched one of the videos that I did in French. Donc, si vous êtes français, parfois je fais des vidéos en français. On occasion, I do videos in French. But anyway, when the masking first came out back in, I'm wanting to say it was August of 2020. I believe that was around the time when retail establishments and public buildings, congregant settings first started to require masks. And the rules were pretty basic. You just had to have something in front of your face. And my outgoing, extroverted nature notwithstanding, I'm a pretty conciliatory guy. I do not enjoy conflict. I'd rather calm things down. And so, okay, you want me to shove something in front of my face? So I went to a local discount store, and there are 3 members. I have my youngest, who is now coming up on 11, but in 2020, he was 6 turning 7. So I went out and I bought 3 of these. I think you call them neck gaiters. And so, okay, you want me to put something over my face? And I'd have this. I felt like I was robbing places. I'd go in and put that on there, get my gas, get my groceries, go to the pharmacy, whatever I had to do, and then pull it down. Whoa. Yeah. And then later, and I don't have a link to it, but Duke University came out with a study, and they actually, in a laboratory setting, they looked at various types of masks, N95 types, cloth, different varying types of cloth with double weaved or something like that. And then they also studied these neck gaiters. And they said that these neck gaiters could actually be worse than not wearing any mask, because, I mean, this sucker is see-through. I can see myself through it. And what Duke University determined was that because they're so porous, that your respiratory droplets, remember that they would actually, they're more prone to aerosolization, turning your respiratory droplets into aerosols, and that they could actually travel farther and linger in the air longer. And so they basically said that this thing was worse than not wearing any mask at all. But according to the rules, so long as you had something over your mouth and nose, then you could go into a store or grocery store, pharmacy, gas station. I still remember being in a gas station, and I had this, and went in, and some guy came in to pay for his gas, and the attendant was, "Oh, you have to have a mask on." And he just went like that with his shirt, pulled it up. There, you happy? And I've got to watch it. I don't want to get stepped on again by YouTube. And again, this is not medical advice. I'm just telling you my experience that I had during the COVID pandemic. But I also want to explain how I was able to, when my youngest school mandated that the students had to wear masks, I actually succeeded in having him not required. He was not, I presented the school with some information that I'm going to share now, and they allowed that he did not have to wear a mask. One thing they did say is there was singing in the classroom. They would use songs to teach the children. And I was told that he would not be allowed to sing. Remember that? Don't talk moistly and all this stuff that we had to go through. And I think this is pertinent now. I pray to God it does not come back, that they never bring masking mandates. But Saint Anthony Fauci, Mr. I am the science, is now recommending that public health officials bring back mandatory masking mandates, if you can believe it. What's happened is he has just come down with, I think it's his third case of COVID. Fauci is sick with COVID for a third time, according to the reporting that I'm reading. And that's notwithstanding the fact that he has apparently received 6 doses of the COVID vaccines. No opinions on that. I'll leave that alone. It's not my area of expertise. So he's had, but you can read it everywhere, 6 doses of the COVID vaccines, and this is his third apparent reported infection, according to all the papers. You can read it. I'm going to catch up before I get, and then I'm going to start sharing my screen and take you through the odyssey that I went through that enabled me to have my son excluded from having to wear a mask in school. I'm just going to catch up though. Daniel Copeman writes, a guy had a face mask made that makes it look like you're not wearing a mask. People were losing their minds. I saw those. I saw videos of it. And he'd actually have to pull it down to show. It was like a picture of his own face. And he had it lithographed or whatever the process is onto a mask. And it actually looked like his face. I saw that. Daniel, I'm not the greatest parent in the world. Parenting is a struggle. Some things I do right, some things not so well. You take your wins where you can get them. When they said they weren't going to allow my guy to sing in school, I decided I'd take the win on the masks. And all right, you're not allowed to sing in school. Big deal. He can't carry a tune anyway. It's genetic. And then Daniel's writing, and Daniel again is in Quebec, where they had curfews, and it was one of the worst places in Canada to be. Although I don't think Quebec jailed any pastors. That happened to 2 pastors in Alberta, which you would think would be one of the freer provinces, but they put 3 pastors in jail. Art Pulowski, James Coates, and Tim Stevens. All 3 went to jail. In Manitoba, Tobias Thiessen, who's a gentleman who I have actually met. I met him when he traveled down to Ontario. And then another guy by the name of Phil Hutchins or Hutchison, he as well. So we've had 5 pastors in this country who went to jail for daring. They kept their churches open. They refused to abide by the draconian measures. And as far as I know, in my home province of Ontario, and probably in Quebec as well, all that happened were fines were issued. And I know pastors who were fined. Alex Kloosterman at the church I attended up in Peterborough, Hill City Baptist, they were fined. He was fined. Henry Hildebrandt out in Aylmer, Ontario, their church, and the combined fines were over $300,000 in the case of the Henry Hildebrandt and his congregation. And another one that I met, Jacob Riome with Trinity Baptist in near Kitchener-Waterloo, just around the St. Jacobs area. I went to his church, and it was unbelievable what we went through. But I want to keep this to masks because I don't want to get in trouble with the pink-haired fact checkers with their PhDs in gender studies. And so what happened was early in the pandemic, back in May of 2020, I was reading an article in Canada's own CBC, the most authoritative, trusted news source in this country, if you believe that. But that's the perception of a lot of people, that the CBC is genuine, good, reputable, trustworthy news. So, and this was one of the articles I shared with the school. So allow me to share my screen now. And I was all over this. So let me make sure my screen is sharing. Share. Black right now. There it is. Okay. And the headline of the article is "Use of Masks During COVID Not Always the Answer," says epidemiologist. Hey, someone qualified, a qualified individual, a professor no less, a professor of epidemiology at the University of Toronto. I'm going to read the article. This is back from May of 2020, and I've been paying attention. You see this lovely picture of the masks that you still see people wearing these. There was a church here in town where they gathered and made them, and were selling them for $1 or $2 each. And then people would hang them on their rear view mirrors like a pair of fuzzy dice, the way you treat all medical grade PPE. At any rate. And this is from CBC News in New Brunswick. And it says, as New Brunswick continues to reopen for business, the use of masks is being strongly recommended by the government when physical distancing cannot be maintained. Dr. Jennifer Russell, New Brunswick's Chief Medical Officer of Health, said anyone who cannot keep an effective physical distance during COVID-19 should wear a mask. At this time, it was only a recommendation. The mandates hadn't come out yet. Some exceptions include children under 2 and people who can't wear a mask because of breathing troubles. But then it goes on to say, but Dr. Colin Furness, an infection control epidemiologist and assistant professor at the University of Toronto, says wearing a mask can be dangerous. So this isn't me talking. This is Dr. Colin Furness, an infection control epidemiologist and assistant professor at the University of Toronto. I followed his Twitter account, although he blocked me later. And because I wanted to talk to him about this article, and he just blocked me. He said it can be dangerous. He has CBC, I'm sure, checked into his bona fides, his accreditations, his educational background. They're presenting him as an infection control epidemiologist, a university professor. And he says that wearing a mask can be dangerous. Quoting back from the article, that is if the wrong mask is worn, if it's worn incorrectly, or people have incorrect expectations when wearing it. And then it quotes him as saying the worst one is wearing one for too long, noting masks can collect bacteria and other viruses. I have at times referred to masks as petri dishes. I don't know if that's a proper designation. I don't have the requisite educational background, but that's what I call them. And hearing that an infection control epidemiologist saying that they can collect bacteria and other viruses, which are pathogens. Pathogens are disease-causing things like bacteria, like viruses. Furness said he wonders why this information isn't being shared when there is evidence about it. Now he's going to give evidence. Fantastic. He said a study in a UK medical journal showed healthcare workers who wore cloth masks all day while working were 13 times more likely to get a respiratory illness when compared to the standard practice of only wearing a mask when necessary. 13 times, that's 1,300% increased risk of getting a respiratory illness. Wow. And then it went on to say those who wore a paper or procedure mask, and I've got one of those, I have a box of them that I never used, given to me. Those who wore a paper or procedure mask were twice as likely, so a 200% increased risk to get some type of respiratory infection if they wore it all day. N95 masks only worn when required during the study, and no staff were affected. I'll read that sentence again. The N95 masks were only worn when required during the study, and no staff were affected. Now, Furness went on to say, and this is a quote, "This should not, or this shouldn't surprise us," Furness said. "A mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start inhaling them." Again, I'm not an infection control epidemiologist. I'm going to a reputable news source, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, a Crown Corporation, a branch of Canada's own government. And they're telling me, reporting on, giving me a recognized authority on infectious disease. An epidemiologist studies the modes or the methods, the manner in which things like viruses transmit. And I'm going to read that again. This should not surprise us. A mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start inhaling them. And then the article goes on to say that he said drug-resistant bacteria could be worse than COVID-19 for some people. And then he just went on, more information on wearing masks is needed. Furness said he despairs at advice around use of masks, adding it makes people feel safe because they are doing it to protect themselves. "I'm not anti-mask," he said, noting he's just against use without accompanying literacy. That's what I'm attempting to provide here, is to provide some providing the literature, providing the studies. And so I'm going to stop sharing this tab and go back to my stream. Let's see. Good. I'm going to catch up on what's reading. Before, he mentioned that there was a UK medical journal that had published a study. I found that study way back in 2020, and I'm going to share it with you now. Daniel Copeman homeschools, and God bless you. I wish we could do that. Unfortunately, in my household, it's not an option. And there are reasons beyond COVID why I applaud every parent who is able to homeschool their children. Young minds are so moldable, and I consider the public educational system to be the public indoctrination system. You can choose your gender. You can ignore biological reality. Anyway, Daniel never complied. Anna Monarchy writes, IUBT authorities would try the same nonsense they did at churches at a mosque or synagogue. I don't know. You never. There's a mosque not far from where I live, about half an hour, and I wanted to check it out. I wanted to see if they were complying, but I never did during the time when gathering was restricted. I was curious to know, because I don't think other faith communities I don't think Christian faith communities were the outliers. I think other faith communities were probably gathering as well. And I wondered whether or not they were. I wanted confirmation, but I never got it. And would the authorities be as heavy-handed with other faith backgrounds? Because now we're getting into race. If you're in a mosque, it's predominantly Middle Eastern, Indian, Asian individuals, and then the whole the specter of racism comes up. And Monarchy goes on to say, I'd say wearing a mask while exercising is a joke, but it's really more of a running gag. Very punny. Zombie Force is here, and he's giving me a thumbs up. Thank you for the 4 already. Again, if you like my content, I'll ask you to hit that thumb. Help me out. I would appreciate it. I publicized this video on Reddit where I post as Grow a Set, although I don't post much anymore on that platform. I find it so heavily censored. It's worse than Facebook or Twitter has now become decent, although it's become the Wild West. But I would prefer living in the Wild West to living in Mao's China or Stalin's old Soviet Union or Hitler's Germany or Franco's Spain or Mussolini's Italy, to wear out all the political references. Tina Starry wrote, I bought a box of N95 from Costco and the chemical smell was overwhelming, not something I want to breathe all day. I'm going to soon be sharing it in just a sec after I read what Brett has written. I'm going to be sharing that UK medical journal and their published study, peer-reviewed science. Brett Skinner says, I think you mean to put a question mark, exclamation question mark. I think you still listen to Fauci. That's the tone I hear. I hear what Fauci is saying. I think it's important to be aware of what's being spoken. How can you confront things if you're not aware of them? So that's the context. And Daniel Copeman referencing, I just went through Franco's Spain, Mao's China, Stalin's Soviet Union, Hitler's Germany, etc. He's saying that soon we'll be able to add Trudeau's Canada to the list. I think we almost pretty much already can add it. But I'm going to go to the article now. This is in the, again, peer-reviewed science. Sharing. This is the British Medical Journal. Let's see if it's sharing. Not yet. Bum, 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 bum. There it is. And this is a cluster randomized trial of cloth masks compared with medical masks in healthcare workers. And this article was published in 2015. So we're not dealing with something from back in the days of the Spanish flu. We're not even dealing with something from the 20th century. We're dealing with something from the 21st century. And so 2020, this was only 5 years old when COVID first became a thing. The objective of the study was to compare the efficacy, meaning effectiveness, of cloth masks to medical masks in hospital healthcare workers, HCWs. And the null hypothesis is that there is no difference. So they're seeking to see, is there any difference, basically, is what they're saying. Is there any difference? We're going to assume there's none, that there is no difference between a cloth mask, a medical mask, or an N95. We're just going to assume that. And the study was conducted at 14 secondary level or tertiary level hospitals in Hanoi, Vietnam. There were 1,607 hospital or healthcare workers, who were aged 18 years of age and older, working full-time in selected high-risk wards, places where I gather there would be a high risk of contracting a respiratory infection. And the wards were randomized to medical masks, cloth masks, or a control group. Participants used the mask on every shift for 4 consecutive weeks. Clinical, and the main outcome measure was clinical respiratory illness, CRI, influenza-like illness, ILI, and laboratory-confirmed respiratory virus infection. And here's what they found. The rate of all infection outcomes were highest in the cloth mask arm, with a rate influenza-like illness statistically significantly higher in the cloth mask arm. Relative risk equals, it was a 13-fold increased risk. That's 1,300%. 95% control indicator. And that was compared to the medical mask arm. Cloth masks also had significantly higher rates of ILI compared with the control arm. In the background, respiratory viruses, respiratory infections happen. That's called the background rate. Might be 1 in 10,000, whatever it is. And what they found is that those wearing cloth masks, my reading of this, were at a 13-fold or 1,300% increased risk of developing a respiratory infection versus the background rate, what would normally occur. In cloth mask, or rather in, they refer to these as procedural masks. I'll take it out. I mean, we've all seen these stupid things. The little metal nose clip dealy. And with these masks, the risk was increased by 200%. You were double putting one of these on, double the risk. So cloth, something better than this. 1,300% increased risk. Procedural or medical mask, 200% risk. And then they looked at, and this is why it's a cluster trial, because there's more than, well, they had 3 different groups. Then they had other individuals who were wearing N95 masks, but the N95s were not worn for the entire shift. They were worn when the healthcare worker would be involved in a procedurally. So they would be engaged in a procedure. And once the procedure was done, then the mask would be removed, thrown out, and another mask would not be put on until the start of the next procedure. And that cohort, that arm of the cluster trial, had 0% increased risk. I have linked both of those articles down below. So if you're welcome to share them. You're welcome to share this video if you like. If I didn't want it shared, I wouldn't be putting it out on YouTube. That's for darn sure. I'm going to share one last bit of information that has come to light since 2020. But it was those 2 articles, along with what I wrote, that resulted in the school saying, fair enough, we will not require your child to wear a mask in class. However, we will require that he not sing. And as I say, I decided to take the win on the masks. But I put up with, okay, you can't sing in school. And as I said, he can't, like me, he can't carry a tune in any case. And I don't think he's that big into singing anyway. He likes music, but I don't think he's a big singer. I will add in one last little editorial comment. Anyone, even my age, even at 58, I remember what it was like in grade 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, when you're in school, The last thing you want to be is the outlier. You don't want to be the one who is different. And in his class, he was the only one not wearing a mask. And I understood. It bothered him. He didn't like being different, and no one does at that age. So eventually what I ended up doing, I came across there was a restaurant here in town, a fish and chip joint. And the staff there were wearing these. You might remember these. They have two. If I look at it that way, you see these two little bumps there. That's a chin rest. It's just a thin, flimsy. I fished this out from under the seat of my vehicle, and because I wanted to show it tonight, and I knew I'd stuffed it down there ages ago. And it has the two loops, the same as any other mask, and it sits out the face. And this met the requirements. And seeing the staff at this fish and chip joint wearing these, I said, that's fantastic. I can see your face. Heck, if I catch you in the right light, I don't even know you're wearing one if it's not as dirty as this one. It's actually branded. If you look, you can see it maybe. See the lettering on there? It says Mingle Mask. And you could buy them off Amazon and things like that. But Jackie, the woman who owned the fish and chip joint, she was selling them for $5 each. So I said, I bought 5 or 6. I'm like, gimme. And so I sent him to school with this on, and he was thrilled to be conforming. And I get it. You know, I'm not big on brainless, mindless conformity, but when you're that age. And he was so excited when he came home. He said, so-and-so, I'm not the only one wearing this. My friend, and I'm not going to say the kid's name because his mom actually watches my channel on occasion. She lives in town here. Amazing woman. She went down to Ottawa during the Ottawa convoy protest. One of the people from whom I got firsthand accounts of what it was like. Also, the pastor at my church. I knew a number of people who went down firsthand. And just, that was such an incredible time. But this is long before that. That was March 2022 when that rolled through. Right now, I'm talking about what was happening in August, September, October of 2020 when the mask mandates were being rolled out. And I want to share, before I get going off topic, the last little bit of information. And this comes from the World Health Organization. So let me share my screen again. And this is the WHO, the World Health Organization. I'm not allowed to have an opinion. But CBC is allowed to have an opinion. Peer-reviewed journal is allowed to have an opinion. And the World Health Organization, they're certainly allowed to have an opinion. I'm not. So this is the World Health Organization. There's their logo. Coronavirus disease advice for the public, when and how to use masks. Let me make sure this is sharing. Yeah, it's working. At least near as I can tell. And it says, masks should be used as part of a comprehensive strategy of measures to suppress transmission and save lives. The use of a mask alone is not sufficient to provide an adequate level of protection against COVID-19. If COVID-19 is spreading in your community, stay safe by taking some simple precautions such as distancing, wearing a mask, keeping rooms well ventilated, avoiding crowds, cleansing your hands, coughing into a bent elbow or tissue. But then it says in bold lettering, make wearing a mask a normal part of being around other people. The appropriate use, storage, and cleaning or disposal of masks are essential. Essential. Oh, this is essential, meaning vital, important. You know, it's like driving a car. Don't just drive it. Obey the speed limit. Obey the rules of the road. These are essential things. So what are the essential things when you're wearing a mask? Well, they say here are the basics. of how to wear a mask. It says, clean your hands before you put your mask on, as well as before and after you take it off, and after you touch it at any time. So anytime you touch the mask, we're being told to clean your hands, clean, wash, sanitize. Anytime, when you put it on, when you take it off, anytime you touch it. How many times do we see people? I work with a lady. She's wearing one of the cloth ones. I don't have one of those. But I'll be talking to her and she'll go, when you come back from break, can you, thanks. And then she'll put the mask back on. And going back to that article from CBC News with an infection control epidemiologist describing this as an ideal breeding ground for bacteria and other viruses as well as COVID-19. Well, obviously you want to wash your hands every time you touch this because of what we all learned in grade 7 and 8 health class about cross-contamination and why we wash our hands after going to the bathroom and wash your hands frequently, because people touch their nose, their eyes, their mouth reflexively without even thinking about it. And then we touch door handles and other common touch surfaces, and this is how viruses spread. And so here you have an ideal breeding ground. According to an infection control epidemiologist, you have an ideal breeding ground. I'll go right back to that article and share the exact verbiage used by Colin Furness, Dr. Colin Furness. A mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start breathing them in. Well, if you're breathing them in, you're also touching them when you touch the mask. And this is why the World Health Organization, in my estimation, is telling you to clean your hands before you put your mask on, as well as before and after you take it off, and after you touch it at any time. Then it says make sure it covers both your nose, mouth, and chin. When you take off a mask, store it in a clean plastic bag, and every day either wash it if it's a fabric mask or dispose of a medical mask in a trash bin. And don't use masks with valves. I had one more mask to show off, and it's not even a mask. Going back to my military service, anything that touches skin you get to keep. So I got to keep my neck gaiter. And this thing is fantastic. Let me end streaming now. The British Medical Journal study that's on the screen. Link is down below, so you can look at it. But this thing is classic. And I wore this during the winter months when it gets cold. And see if you can see, you see the little mesh there. But it complied. It complied with the rules. And this we'd be wearing on outdoor exercises. We used to do them in the field in Valcartier where it gets to 40 below. And where's that little, I lost it. Where's that little vent? Yeah, there it is. Yeah. There, that nice little vent. So I could get some fresh air and I wasn't breathing in the gunk I'd already breathed out. Even the Army, put a mesh there. But what does the Army know? Anyway, just insane times. I'm not going to answer the question, are masks dangerous? Colin Furness, infection control epidemiologist with the University of Toronto, never wanted to talk to me about it on Twitter, blocked me because what happened? You said they were they had the potential to be dangerous. And certainly everyone I see still wearing them, like this woman with whom I work, who touches it constantly, Dr. Furness said, it's a great, you're breathing on it all day long. It's a great place to collect bacteria and other viruses. And then people go in and they've got this petri dish on their face, and then they sit down in the lunchroom and they put it on the table. Gee, thanks a lot. Another common touch surface. They don't wipe the table down. They don't care about my own opinion. They don't care about anybody. They just selfish, caring about themselves. They are under the impression that this will provide them some degree of protection, and they don't care if if it's loaded with goodness knows what, flesh-eating streptococcus. Throw it on the table. It's insane what's happened to this world. I have to be careful. I don't want to get stepped on again by YouTube. Let me read what's being written. Zombie Force. I'm getting the messages are coming fast and furious, and I'm behind. So, Zombie Force is giving everyone a thumb up, and I'm already up to 8. God love you guys. Thank you. Thank you. I've got a number of people watching now, and everyone's commenting. This is fantastic. Brett Skinner is saying hello. Tina Starry is saying, I bought a box. I read that. And okay, that's where I'd left off. Daniel writes, soon you can add Trudeau. I read that. Whale oil beef has shown up, and as whale oil likes to do, when he shows up late, he clicks on double time speed so he can catch up. Look forward to seeing you live. Randy Kinder had his money on an alien invasion, not monkeypox. I wouldn't say monkeypox is a thing yet. And the reason I say that is because it was back in May, June, July of 2022, over 2 years ago, that the World Health Organization declared monkeypox back then as a public health emergency of international concern, back 2 years ago. And then I forget exactly when, some months later, they lifted that designation. And it kind of faded into background noise. Now they're saying it's back because of the Democratic Republic of Congo, what used to be the old Zaire. It's where Muhammad Ali and George Foreman had their famous Rumble in the Jungle. Was in the Democratic Republic of Congo back in that era, I think that was 1975 or thereabouts, 1976. That was it was still called Zaire back then. Digressing. Daniel Copeman writes with respect to Randy's comment about it being him having his. We all saw that video or that meme where they have that whiteboard with all the boxes with all the different scenarios playing out, and who had monoliths in the desert for this month, and who had killer hornets for this month, and who remember those. So Daniel or Randy's money was on aliens. That would be exciting. I would have my radar up, and I don't believe anything now on the mainstream. I believe the sports scores. When the nightly news reports that the Maple Leafs were kicked out of the first round of the playoffs again, I believe that. When they say that the Toronto Blue Jays won or lost a game, I believe that. If they tell me that pretty much anything else, I'm very skeptical, very circumspect. And Daniel Copeman writes, but you can't vaccinate people against aliens. Ha, ha, ha. And Brett Skinner writes, yeah, you got to see me wearing a mask on this stream. Yeah. Actually, there was one, I did one a while ago where my thumbnail picture is, I think I had goggles and a mask on, clickbait, call it, trying to, whatever. I'm just trying to catch up on the messages that are being written. I've got a different name. I don't think I've seen the name Stanley Lubarsky. It's a great name. I like that. Stanley Lubarsky. Sounds like the great Lebowski. I thought I checked out the channel. Never heard of it, but thanks for the recommendation. Just subbed to the channel. Thank you. Hey, I got a new subscriber. If you want anyone else wanting to subscribe, please do. I do ramble a lot. And what I recommend is whale oil beef's machination, and that is put me on double time speed. I'm not the fastest talker in the world. And when you put me at double time speed, I actually sound a bit like someone like Ben Shapiro or Douglas Murray, guys who talk a million, mile a minute. Whale oil beef. Hi, Stanley. Great seeing you here. Zombie Force. Can we get a good joke, Gordon? You have great ones. Okay. I need a topic. I need a topic. I mean, here's one that comes immediately to mind. What's the difference between God and a doctor? God doesn't think he's a doctor. Doctors think they're God. Zombie Force writes, peer pressure. Whale oil beef writes, always trust the WHO unless you don't. Hey, trust is a difficult thing. I wonder if I don't imagine that community standards mandates that one put blind faith and trust in any political body, but they might. Who knows? In this draconian, Orwellian, dystopian world that we are evolving into slowly over time. Stanley is writing, during the demic, with the word plan in front, I didn't do anything differently and never took that poison shot either. Most of the people here haven't, myself included. I also never got sick. I did. February of 2022. It went through the house. We never tested. I think I'm probably one of 2 or 3% of the broader population who never got a shot and never even once tested. Not a PCR nasal colonoscopy, nor those stupid rapid tests that they were giving out free at the drugstore and grocery stores. Would you like your free COVID test? No. And so I never tested. But in February 2022, Thursday night, my youngest guy got it. He was fine the very next day. He went through an evening with a fever, chills, and typical flu-like illness. But by Friday, he was fine. But then that Friday afternoon, Friday evening, I got it. Aches, chills, fever. And it lingered with me into Saturday and a little bit into Sunday, but by Monday I was 100% right as rain. And my wife had it for about 2 days herself, and that was it. The reason I suspect it was probably COVID is because at that time, February, March 2022, they were reporting that conjunctivitis, pink eye, was a common rebound after a COVID infection, that it was common for people to suffer from pink eye. And I got it. I got pink eye. It went from one eye to the other and then back to the original eye. And then it went away and it hasn't come back since. So my suspicion is, it was probably COVID. And I've been, like I say, it was a 2-day nothing burger and I was not worried. But other individuals, when they got sick, if they had been addicted to the news programming that they'd been hearing for the better part of 2 years, the deadly coronavirus, you don't want to get this thing. And anyone got sick, they thought, oh my gosh, I got the bubonic plague. I've got hemorrhagic fever. I'm going to die. The programming was that strong that people were terrified of getting it. And then if they did get it, it was insane what was happening. And a channel I strongly recommend watching is Dr. John Campbell out of the UK. He's a nurse practitioner and I think he's retired now, but a former professor of nursing. He's actually has accreditation in medical textbooks for nursing students. He earned his PhD in the dissemination of teaching materials digitally online. That's where he's not a medical doctor per se. He's not He's not a medical doctor, but he's a nurse practitioner. He actually worked in the medical field, and nurses are like mechanics in a way. You have the guys who design the cars, and then you have mechanics who work on them and know them intimately. That's the way I view nurses. Nurses have hands-on practical experience in the medical field. They see everything. And I have met, well, my mother was a registered nurse. I talk about the fact often that I don't have any medical degrees myself. No, I don't have a scientific background, but I did take university level science courses in things like psychology 101, and environmental studies, and studying ecology, and learn the scientific method. I know what a double blinded placebo-controlled trial. I know mechanistically how it works, how it functions. I've explained it in other videos. You know, double blind, meaning neither the investigators nor the patients or participants, clinical people participating as patients in a clinical trial. Neither the investigator nor the trial participants know whether they're getting the drug or the placebo. That's the placebo control element. One part will be given actual medication of some pharmaceutical, and the other group will be given a sugar pill, a placebo. You know, I understand this stuff, and a lot of people have this pejorative view of Christians and say, "Oh, Christians don't believe in science." I believe in science, but I believe in science for what it is. Science is an investigative process, and it's limited. It's affected by bias, and many people have said that, you know, you got to look at who's financing that. British Medical Journal study on cloth masks versus medical procedural masks and N95 masks. It was funded by 3M, which manufactures N95 style masks. And so their trial, which showed no increased risk of a respiratory infection when wearing an N95 style mask, made by the same people who are funding the research, that speaks to the potential for bias. And as far as I know, that study has not been replicated, which is another huge factor in when you're evaluating any study. You want to know, has it been replicated? Has a second study or a third or fourth, has this shown, have these results shown across multiple trials, or is it only one? There was one trial done in Bangladesh, probably 2022, thereabouts, where 250,000 people, I think it was 250, I think it was over 200,000 people, were one half given masks, one half not. And that study found a very small but statistically significant reduction in viral spread in the masked arm. And those who love masks and think they're wonderful with their, you know, internet degrees in epidemiology said, there, it's proven. There's proof. One study, one single study, which, if you read the peer review process, noted the limitations that were on this in the study, the potential for bias, and the need for replication. But as far as I'm aware, and I have looked, there's been no replication. And so this world has gone bat, you know what, crazy. Now I've gone too far, and the messages are rolling in. So anyway, the last comment I was talking about was Stan Lubrowski, who had written about, you know, didn't get the shot, never got sick. He got a 3-4 day bad cold in early 2020 that may or may not have been COVID-19. Who knows? Who knows? Daniel Coltman writes, Amen, Stanley. The exact same thing happened to me. Exactly. I think it happened to a lot of people. I think it happened to a lot of people like ourselves. And unfortunately, the sad part about this conversation going on right now is we're all like-minded people. We're in our echo chamber. We all are pretty, when it comes to all things COVID, we're all pretty much in agreement. Might be minor variances. I know whale oil beef is of the opinion, I believe whale oil beef is of the opinion that viruses have never been completely 100% isolated. And so he has doubts as to whether or not they actually exist or not. And there are individuals who say that viruses are not real. That's not my view, but I respect differences of opinion. I'm not going to straw man. I don't like doing that. I prefer what's called the steel man argument. If I disagree with someone, I like to present their view as strongly as I can and not make fun of it and belittle it and try and make it into a man made of straw so I can tear it apart easily. That's done. I consider that intellectual cowardice, honestly. So reading on. Stanley Bobrowski shares a comment that I think is it's my common experience. We just rented a cottage a month or so ago with my wife's extended family, and there were around 20 of us there. And it's our household is the only one that's unjabbed. And after that, they all reported back. Well, I don't know if it was everyone, but a number of them were saying, oh, we're all sick. Everyone in the house is sick. My household, everyone's fine. And it's repeated over and over again. And my workplace is the same. The absenteeism rate, I left the Army in June of 2021 because I knew what was coming. So as soon as the shots were authorized, in Canada, we called it an interim authorization. US, it was called a emergency use authorization. But as soon as they were authorized, I knew that the military would force them. And that if I refused, I could be deemed to be refusing a lawful order, which could lead to court-martial, loss of pension, bad news. So in December of 2020, when the authorization came out, I put in for my release. I said, look, I'm, 2020, I was 54, I guess, 54, 55 years of age. My knees are going, my wife has some health issues, yada, 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 nothing to do with the jabs. But at that point, they weren't even mandated. They were still a choice at that time. I had a sergeant at the time who kept saying to me, well, you're going to have to get it. You're going to have to get it. Even if you get out, you're still going to have to get the damn shot. Well, I haven't yet. Although if you look and see what's happening in Australia and what they've done in terms of the reporting is that they've ceded their, in the case of a declared emergency, they have ceded their constitutional autonomy to the World Health Organization. You can read up on that yourselves. It's depressing what has happened in Australia. And I kind of see Australia as being even closer to the tip of the proverbial spear than Canada. Anyway, going to keep reading. Jason King is here. Good evening to you as well, my friend. Staniel Lubrowski, I agree, and I don't trust them, nor have I ever. I used to have a degree of trust in the medical community. And broadly speaking, our family doctor, I do have some respect for her as an individual, but the industry as a whole is profit driven. And there's a revolving door between the regulatory agencies and the pharmaceutical industry itself. The individuals will be working for the major pharmaceutical companies, and then they will transition and go and work for bodies like Health Canada, the FDA, the EMA, and then they'll transition back and go into senior executive roles back in the pharmaceutical industry. It's the old adage about the fox looking after the hen house. How can you have confidence that the regulatory agencies are independent of the pharmaceutical companies that they're supposed to be overseeing when there's this revolving door? And it's a revolving door that's been enumerated in publications put out by PubMed, which is a branch of Anthony Fauci's own National Institutes of Health. Just Google an article, just Google Pfizer repeat offender, and you'll find out about this revolving door. They write an article on it about how Bextra was an anti-inflammatory drug that was approved as a safe and effective anti-inflammatory. Back in 2000, it was on the market from 2000 to 2005. Then it had to be removed from the market because of too many deaths, too much heart damage. And it took 5 years. This drug, Bextra, Bextra, was on the market for 5 years before it got removed. It takes time. Doing science right takes time. It does not move at warp speed. I say that a lot on this channel. Zombie Force is laughing. Yeah. Whale oil beef is, and just type that into YouTube, brought to you by Pfizer. And the Oscars, brought to you by Pfizer. CNN, tonight's nightly newscast, brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer. You don't bite the hand that feeds. And that's why when a guy like Joe Rogan comes along and dares to publicize under a doctor's advice, according to him, he was taking medications that the CNNs of the world, they said he was taking horse paste. And he, according to Joe Rogan, and he had Sanjay Gupta, the medical guru of CNN, on his show, and he flat out said, "You were lying to the American people. You were lying to the viewing public. You told them I was taking horse paste. I was taking the human formulation of the drug ivermectin. I don't know whether it works or not. I never looked into it. I wasn't concerned enough about COVID to research medications for it." Stan is writing, when that movie came out, everyone was calling him what I said, The Big Lebowski. Great. I think that's a Coen Brothers movie. Love the Coen Brothers. Clown P1SS. I don't know if I've seen your name before. Thank you for coming on. Hope you're enjoying the channel. Hope you'll give me a thumb up. There we go. I don't want to be too gratuitous in my don't want to sound, come on, please give me some likes. Writes, I laughed when Fauci yapped about his favorite comfort food. I don't remember that. I don't remember what his favorite comfort food. I don't pay attention to him. I look at the headlines a lot of times, read the articles, and I don't go into depth. I don't watch mainstream media news. What happens is when a news story hits and I hear about it typically through social media, I then go back and check it and I'll look for news stories on it. Like when Fauci was recommending masking, saw that in some social media posts, Twitter type feeds, and I went, okay, is this true? And I go and I search it out. Okay, it's true. Fauci is recommending that public health authorities bring mask mandates back. Well, Whale Oil writes, Dr. John Campbell formally pushed then woke up. Yeah, Dr. John Campbell. And you can find him on here on YouTube. And I don't know when he had his epiphany, when he had his aha moment. But the man worked in the medical industry. He's a trained nurse practitioner. And so there would be a tendency for individuals within the industry to have a certain degree of faith and trust in it. And it says something to me that a nurse practitioner and someone who went along with everything then suddenly did a 180. But of course now If you go onto sites like Wikipedia, they will say that he spreads misinformation. I would say listen to the man's content, fact check it, and then determine for yourself whether or not it is misinformation. We were told that the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that it came from a bat in a wet market in Wuhan, China. And as it turned out, there has never been any evidence to substantiate that claim, and yet that was presented as fact. And anyone who suggested that it came from a lab was deemed as spreading misinformation. Now, things have flipped around, and the predominating view in a large part of the medical community is that, yes, it did come from a lab, that this is an engineered virus. And there's another guy you can watch here called Dr. Colin McMillan, and VJon Health, VEJON. And he goes into some of the detail as to the evidence around why. I don't understand it. ACE2 receptors and all this stuff, and the S protein, and how it shows evidence of manipulation. It's beyond my pay grade, for lack of a better expression. Stanley writes, people made such a huge deal out of what was basically a common cold. That's Stanley's opinion, fact checkers. I'm just reading. I was uninvolved Christmas 2020 because I refused to take the test when I wasn't even sick. It was principle. Same thing happened with my family. You're not coming to our house. Fine. And then, the following year, you're not getting the vaccine. Well, then you can't come. Fine. And that's where my Christian faith comes in. I was reading Joshua around that time. That's the book of Joshua. The books of the Bible are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And then right after Deuteronomy comes the book of Joshua. Joshua is Moses is sent up to the mountain to look into the promised land, but God has told him that he's not allowed to go into the promised land himself. But he's taken up to the mountain and he sees it, and it's actually Joshua who leads the Israelites, the tribes of Israel, across the Jordan River into the promised land. And they make a deal with a group of people called the Gibeonites, who lie to them. The Gibeonites lie. They say, we come from a way far away. Make a deal with us. We traveled weeks to get here. Look, our sandals are worn out. These were brand new sandals when we left. Look at our bread. It was warm from the oven. We just baked it and now look, it's all dry and moldy. Look at our clothes. They're all worn out. And so the Israelites, Joshua and I forget who the priest was, Eleazar, they believed them, and they said, okay, we'll make a deal with you. And it said they did not consult with the Lord. They did not pray to God. They did not seek divine understanding. They just took the evidence that was presented to them. And when I did pray over, and the answer in my heart was loud and clear. There's a force at work, and it is a deceptive force at work. You don't have to agree with that. I don't force my religion on anyone. I don't force my faith. I profess it loudly and forcefully, but at the same time, respectfully. I pray to God that people will watch my channel and will come to Christ. But ultimately, God gives us free will. It's our choice whether we want to follow him or not, whether we want to acknowledge Jesus's loving sacrifice on that cross. You can take it or not. Zombie Force writes, some people don't realize the difference between a virus and a germ. So this is where I sometimes have trouble with the term virus. And I've had this discussion with whale oil beef before, and I'll say, I just call it a bug. I mean, I was in the Army, I was in university, I lived in congregate settings. I know that like gastro would travel through. It would go from person to person, and I would just call it a bug. I got chicken pox as a child. It went from my sister to me to my younger brother. Boom, boom, boom. We all presented the same symptoms. We broke out in spots. I had them all over, and it went from her to me to my brother. And was it a virus? Was it a germ? Was it whatever? It was something. It's chickenpox, childhood disease. Anyway, Sheriff of YouTube has shown up. He says the masks are the libtards' uniform. They want them back for elections. I remember I was playing tennis back in 2021, and I've been dead set against this from the beginning. Right from March of 2020, I wrote on my Facebook wall, on my Facebook feed, I wrote a long-winded diatribe, and I said, seriously, we're shutting down the world so that dear old Uncle Joe can have an extra few months in a wheelchair with getting his diaper changed. This is what we're doing to the world. I thought it was insane, and I got jumped on, screamed at. And I was playing tennis. Probably it was that summer or the summer after. And there was a young lad, Matt, who I played tennis with, who's actually gone to law school, so he's no idiot. He's passed the bar. And he was all for masking. And I'm like, going into a restaurant, wearing a mask, and then sitting down. And it's like, okay, we're telling the virus to stop circulating now because everyone's sitting down. And he goes, well, yeah, fair enough. He said, but it reminds everyone, it reinforces the fact that there's a pandemic on. It reinforces the fear. And Matt was very, very much a liberal-minded individual. I can tell you another story about I remember it was May, June of 2021, when I went to play tennis on mixed doubles night. And I was the first one to get there along with a woman, British lady. And as we walked onto the courts, we were the only two there. This lady she was walking on air. She was in a great mood. And I said, geez, Sally, not her real name. Geez, Sally, you're in a great mood. And she goes, oh, I just got my second shot. And I went, oh, okay, very good. And she went, have you had your second yet? And I'm not one who likes to lie. I actually hate lying. I'm not saying I don't, but I don't like it. And I try to avoid it whenever possible. And I said to her, Sally, I haven't even had the first. And she went, why? And I went, oh, do you have an hour? And she went, you're not one of those, are you? And I just looked at her and I said, I guess I am. And then quite earnestly, she said, well, why? Tell me why. And I said, all right. I said, first of all, they haven't even completed the clinical trials. They're not even done yet. This is May, June of 2021. And she, yes, they have. And I went, there, you see? I said, if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, this was a conversation I had with her. I said, if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, it's a US government website that's a repository for all the clinical trials for every drug, and you check out Pfizer and Moderna, they're not going to be done until 2022, and then they got extended after that. So I said, the trials aren't even done yet. And she went, but they're approved. And I said, again, they're not approved, they're authorized. In the US, they're calling it an emergency use. And I told her, and I said, just leave it. You got your 2 shots, you're happy. I'd love to see her again. I left the club. And I'd love to know if she's still complying, because most people haven't. Most people got off the booster train. And it's the last figures I read were that only 15%, only 15% of Canadians are up to date as per NIAC, National Association on Immunizations and something like that. National Association on immunizations, NACI. Can't remember the exact acronym, but it's the federal agency. And they're recommending that everyone get jabbed every 6 months. So if it's been 6 months since your last jab, you need to get boosted. And only 15% of Canadians, according to the last data I looked at, have kept up, are still following public health advice. And I wonder, of that 15%, how many people are living in a nursing home, long-term care, hospice type situation where basically they don't know what day of the week it is or maybe even what year it is. And, half of them are taking, like 10 prescription medications already. So it's just like, I hardly know anyone up to date. As a matter of fact, I can't name a single person who's still getting jabbed. Although I suspect there are some people at work who still are getting jabbed, and they're the ones, the handful, 4 or 5, who are still wearing masks. Anyway, gonna read up, and then I've been going on too long, an hour and 20. Daniel Copeman saying that he thinks that Canadians have signed our autonomy over as well. I'm not sure on that either, because that World Health Organization, they had an update. It's called the International Health Regulations, and they were updating that convention, and they were taking away the word advice, whereas where the World Health Organization would act as an advisory body to signatory countries. Now they wanted to make their recommendations, not recommendations, but mandatory. And that bogged down. But what I've heard is that Australia, autonomously in of itself, has ceded its authority without having outside of this IHR, International Health Regulation Agreement. But I mean, there's so much going on in the world, it's almost impossible to keep up 100%. Daniel writes, I got the Christmas and every other gathering banned for naught. Testing, masking, vaccine, and we have been vindicated, but the other side is not going to apologize to us. They are simply going to rationalize their decision. Well, in retrospect, but at the time when I did it, it was the right thing to do. It's amazing the capacity for people to lie to themselves. You were fooled. I so appreciate Jordan Peterson. He was doing an interview with David Rubin, and David Rubin was asking him about getting jabbed because Jordan Peterson travels the world. And Peterson said that he got the jabs. And he said, I got a lot of grief for it, and that's fair enough. And then he said, but I said, here's the deal. I'll get the shots. You leave me alone. And then he said, and how did that work out? And this is where what I appreciate about Jordan Peterson. He said, and pardon, I'm going to swear, I'm going to drop an F-bomb, but this is a quote. Jordan Peterson said, stupid fucking me. He was willing to admit that he was an idiot. Guy probably has an IQ north of 160, and he was fooled. But, he's a clinical psychologist. He's involved. He's on the periphery of the medical field. So it'd be something he's familiar with, had a degree of trust in. I wonder how much his trust has been. I mean, from the content he's putting out, I don't think he's as blindly trusting as he used to be. Whale oil, right? Virus is a nano-sized replicating particle. Thing is, the aided human eye cannot observe it. It's a pseudo-evolved using electron microscopes, microscopy. Bacteria is micro-sized and viewed with a glass lens. And Animonarchy, just a few more comments. I've gotten that from a couple people. Did I get the shot yet? As if I was... genuinely, I don't think I present. People have a pejorative view of what someone who doesn't get the vaccines is. They're living in a trailer park. They're racist. You know, they Trudeau said as much in a French language interview. Que des gens qui ne prennent pas des vaccins sont souvent des misogynes, racistes. And he put out all, you know, are sexist and racist and croient pas dans les sciences. They don't believe in science. He said all these pejorative things. And people who know me personally from the tennis courts or from church or from about town, neighbors, I don't fit their preconceived notion of what someone who wouldn't get vaccinated is. And so they, you didn't, what? And that's why I think it's important for those of us who did not to be loud about it. Don't hide it. I was so annoyed. The PPC candidate for this riding, who I supported, and I had I organized a campaign event for him in a park here downtown, just our little one street, and there's the municipal park with a band shell and stuff. And we had a little meet and greet session. And I asked him, I said, you know, have you had the vaccine? He said, and he wouldn't answer the question. And those of us who didn't get it need to be loud and proud. So with everybody, I mention it all the time at work. I tell people I just meet, you know, they'll say, oh, you used to be in the Army. Why'd you leave us? I wasn't going to get the shot. What? And I've seen eyebrows jump right off people's foreheads. You didn't? No. Why not? No, tell them. Daniel Coben writes, the world population was an attempted clinical trial phase. That was one of my videos that got taken down. I was talking about the concept of global overpopulation. Yeah, and Daniel Coben writes, the mental gymnastics, some people got to do it. And we all do it to varying degrees. We all rationalize. I don't like to be too judgmental. You know, we've all gotten things wrong. And that's, I think, one of the things we have to do from our side is if we want to bring people on board, we've got to be at least a little forgiving, because otherwise people just get their backs up. I did a video a while ago on conflict resolution and the steps that are needed to facilitate intelligent, meaningful, adult dialogue. But what happens typically is people just get their backs up. And, you know, not once during this video, I don't think I've used the term face diaper. And that's a term that will get someone's back up. Call it a face diaper. They'll just, you know, they shut down. They stop listening. You've engaged, they become triggered. They get emotional. And when you get emotional, your brain shuts down. I've done videos on it. I'll leave that alone. And then Whale Oil writes, typically people who watch TV are the ones who got the tiger in the tank. There's an old ad. Remember that from New Jersey when I lived down in the States back in the 70s. Put a tiger in your tank. Exxon. And Daniel Coben, I screamed from the rooftops, don't take the jab. Yeah, likewise. I said the same thing to all my family. I probably influenced a handful of people, but no one in my immediate family, aside from my own household. And it's painful. It's painful. And I have an aunt and an uncle who are no longer with us. An aunt I used to speak to regularly on the phone, and we talked about it, and I tried. And she tried to bring me to her way of thinking. Neither one of us succeeded. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I've gone on for nearly an hour and a half. Thank you, everyone who watched. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for the subscription that I got from the Big Lebowski. I'm gonna stick to that. And anyone else, if you want to subscribe, if you want to share, if you liked my content, if you don't mind fringe Canadians with unacceptable views, God love you. I will come out with some jokes later that had occurred to me. I'm on the march to 1,000. I'd like to get there. Be nice. And get to 4 digits instead just 3. We'll see if we'll get there. Daniel Coleman writes, and he hadn't put this down yet, but here it is. Jesus is King. Good night, y'all. Pray for the sheeple in your life. And as I like to end so many of my videos, and even if you're not a Christian, accept this blessing from the heart. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord, the creator of all things, this wondrous creation is not an accident. This was not pixie dust. This was not spontaneous generation. This is a creation. And may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord, creator of all things, make his face to shine upon you. And may, even in these troubling times with everything going crazy, you can find peace and you can find joy and you can find happiness. Even in the midst, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. So may the Lord grant you peace, and he will invite his son in. Invite Jesus Christ into your heart. Good night. I saved that till the end, and I hope it resonates with at least one person out there. God bless. We'll talk to you soon.